This is ChangeMakers with Katie Goar, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
I'm back again with Joseph Diehl, the Interim Executive Director of the National American Indian Housing Council. We've been discussing the efforts of NAIHC to support American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians and their self-determined goal of providing quality, affordable, culturally relevant housing. Now, Joe, I've seen some beautiful new construction of tribal housing that has really paid attention to artistic and cultural sensitivities and the facts of their journey. Can you share some of the success stories despite these funding obstacles and the land obstacles you talked about in part one?
Sure. There's many success stories out there, and there are actually other federal funding programs. One is called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program, where a tribe can work with Wall Street investors or groups that want to give back. They're able to get funding directly from these investors. The investors get a tax benefit for funding, and then the tribe gets the funds, which are used in innovative ways. And so some of the examples, very hard to describe, but, like in the Southwest, there's issues with water, sewer, electricity. And so a lot of the innovative stuff comes about with solar energy farms. And the history of certain tribes in the Northwest, the grandparents and the parents and the children lived in one unit. Well, HUD had occupancy rules, right, up until the Self-Determination Act, where, oh no, that's too many people in one house. It's like, but that's our culture. That's how we raise our people. And so some of the innovation has come about because HUD has recognized that, again, it's not a cookie cutter, and we need to really address the things that are of value to people. So those are some of the things that we see out there. I can tell you that every year at our conference in June, we highlight new projects, things that people are doing outside the box. Anywhere from tribes are now going off reservation, buying fee simple land, right? Which anybody can do. Like you and I could go out and buy a lot or whatever, and they build a house on it, and it's for their tribal members and not on the reservation. So that's very innovative. It takes money, of course, to do that, but it allows someone to have home ownership that, again, on the reservation, the schooling is not good. Unfortunately, there's a high dropout rate. To go to college, as you probably know, as a young person, it's not cheap anymore, as it was in my day. But it's something that, they're struggling with. We started in the Northwest, by the way, just as a side note, a youth scholarship program where our vendors and people that supplied things to tribes would chip in. Of course, we twisted their arm, but they would fund money, and I believe that fund was around $200,000 or $300,000 by the time I left. I'm sure it's been growing since. So yeah, a lot of good things happening out there. And again, it's the creativity, innovation, cultural relevancy. I mean, you've seen some of the housing in the Southwest. It just blends right in with the environment, with the color scheme and the things that are important to the culture incorporated into the housing. It's really quite fascinating. Many of our tribes, if you were to stop, and I've done this before, I've driven up to tribal housing headquarters and said, hey, can I get a tour of your housing? More than welcome to show you around, and they're very proud of what they've done with very meager resources.
We featured Oscar Arana previously on a podcast, and he even talked about one particular apartment community that built an arts and crafts studio room within the apartment building to try to bring in that culturally important dynamic of being able to do arts and different activities. And we are seeing more and more creative incorporation into housing, but there's a long way to go, isn't there?
A very long way to go. And at our 3 events that we have every year, we typically try to highlight one of our members, either their music or their art. And so, yeah, it's really fascinating. And for me, who was not exposed to that culture as I was growing up, it has been an eye-opener for me, and I love working in Indian country.
What gives you hope when you think about how you can accomplish affordability issues for this particular community in the years ahead? Is there something strategically that you're looking at that just really gives you hope?
Well, what we kind of look at is provide tools for tribal housing professionals to do their job, right? Now, some people say, well, tools, would that be money? Well, no, it's skills. It's, again, what you were talking about, resilience, incorporating their culture into their housing. And we've been very successful, actually, with several corporate funders. And so there are foundations and corporate givers out there. And because we're a 501c3, we're able to accept grant money. And so during COVID, for example, we were able to get some funding from a large bank from their foundation side, and we were able to provide some relief because COVID hit really hard at the tribal level. And again, all of us who live in an urban area, just go down and get our vaccinations, and there's readily available tests. Out in the middle of rural America, right, there's very little resources for folks. So again, we're kind of thinking outside the box, going with the flow, seeing where the needs are. And I think to answer your question, our job is to provide like a toolkit, right? So we recently entered into a program whereby, hey, if you're in the middle of South Dakota, you may not be able to travel to Chicago for one of our trainings, right? And so what we have now is e-learning. So they can get online, have the course at their offices or at home and learn that way. So again, tools, right? That's what we're always thinking of, resources. And we really, really admire their resiliency and their way to cultivate new ideas and new things that just surprise me every time I hear them.
You mentioned health outcomes and community health access. That naturally lets me think of e-health as a tool that we've all learned to use. But how does housing and public health intersect with the population that you're serving? Give us some more ideas about what the needs are and what's happening. You've mentioned it a couple of times as far as the health access.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question because, again, when you're out in a rural area, medical professionals, even nurses, typically live and work in a city. And so those resources are just not out there. So one of the things that we did to intersect with housing, and this was a tribe that was in eastern Washington state, they created housing for their tribal members, but they designated 3 or 4 units that would be for doctors who could come out, spend a couple days from Spokane and live there in a comfortable place and serve tribal members that way. So that's the kind of innovation that they look at, because to get from Spokane to the tribal reservation, it was probably 2.5 to 3 hour drive. And so to come out and see 3 or 4 patients didn't make any sense. But if they can come out once a week, every Monday, right, come out on Sunday and then leave on Monday night or Tuesday morning, then people can be served in that way with better health care. So there is an intersection. Again, it kind of requires innovation because otherwise tribal members have to figure out transportation and how to go to the so-called big city. But the Indian Health Service, again, is another federal government program that needs a lot of funding because there's a lot of issues with health in Indian country. And so it's one of those things that we don't advocate for that per se because we're housing only. But we certainly work with the Indian Health Service. We have them, come to our conferences. And if they're able to do some training, we definitely would invite them to share what resources are, available to our tribal members.
So what do you predict for 2024 as you're going to be celebrating your 50th anniversary and you're tackling some legislative or regulatory issues? any predictions on other items that are going to be on your agenda?
Katie, I think one of the things that we try to do through our legislative conferences is to make sure that our members of Congress have face-to-face, touchy-feely meetings, and they can hear the real-life stories. It's amazing because people come into Washington, D.C. from these rural reservations, and they're just amazed. It's like, oh, it's just, you see the wonder in their eyes when they see these glittering buildings and get to actually meet with a member of Congress that represents their district or possibly one of their state senators. And like my first visit to D.C. back in 1998, I was nervous, right? So it's like, oh my God, member of Congress. And my mentor at that time said, Joe, these people work for you. Drop the nervousness. They want to listen to what you need. And of course, that was before all of the political infighting, but it still makes a difference, Katie, if you can really talk to people. I think some of the most successful legislative visits I've worked on was where we're meeting with like a sitting senator, high-ranking senator, and a tear comes to their eye. It's like, okay, our message is getting through to them. And so those kind of moving moments are what we need in Indian country. We need to share our stories. We need to share our cultures, why funding is important. And it's an obligation of the federal government under the treaties to provide this funding. And that's been woefully short. So my prediction for 2024 is keep the fight going. Talk to members of Congress, tell them what you need, expand the low-income housing tax credit program, which supplements the housing block grants. And so that's our mantra for 2024.
Joe, you have given us quite a level of awareness here, and we appreciate that. I appreciate the message and that you guys are going to keep our public officials moving in the direction that they're obligated and that they just really need to pay attention to. And that happens from hearing voices like yours and having your members in front of them, exactly what you mentioned. So we applaud you and your efforts. As we wrap up here, Joe, I think what the association is doing is amazing. Or is it a council, or do you call yourselves an association?
Well, we call ourselves NAIHC, and it is a council. And so we just have a unique formation under the Internal Revenue Code where we're able to secure grant funding at the cost of, to some extent, those groups that are public charities cannot do as much lobbying. But it's not us doing the lobbying. It's our members who come to D.C. and actually do that work for us, right? Or for them, actually. So, yeah, it's a unique situation. We've been around a long time. I really appreciate that you gave me this opportunity to share. And I look forward to seeing more of your podcasts now that I'm very familiar with it. Actually, I just want to see myself.
That's all right. You've got a great message to share and a great organization and a conduit to do it. So we're glad to have you here. Thank you, Joe, for taking the time, and we look forward to a strong 2024 for you guys.
Thank you, Katie. Take care now.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Goar. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.